What's up guys, back again with another video in the Python series. Today I'll be showing you how to do default arguments and keyword arguments in Python. So the best way to demonstrate to you what default arguments are and how they work is actually just to code it right in front of you. So what I'm going to do is create a new function. So I'm going to do define greet. And the greet function is going to take two arguments, a name and then a message. That's obviously a very simple function, but let's just go ahead and call it now just to make sure it works. So greet, and we'll pass in Billy Bob, and then we'll pass in a message. So you smell like a sock. All right, cool. So now let's go ahead and run this file. And there we go. We get hello Billy Bob, you smell like a sock. Awesome. That's exactly what we want. Let's change this to a plus just so it doesn't add all that extra spacing here. If we rerun this, we get that. So it looks a little better, okay? So every time you call the greet function, you have to pass in the name and message arguments for these two parameters here, okay? So if you want to, you can actually make it have a default value so that you don't have to pass in both every single time. So let's say that you want to, for some reason, have a default message like good morning, then you could do equals, and then you could specify a default value for that parameter. So good morning. So now whenever you call the greet function, you don't have to specify both parameters anymore. You'd only have to specify at least the first one because there's no default value for that one. So if we rerun this, it'll still work the same way. But if we add another function call and say for the first parameter, let's just go ahead and say Kaylin. So in this case, we're providing one argument, which is Kaylin, which is for the first parameter. So that'll specify the name for the value for name. And then for the second one, we're not providing a second argument. So it's just going to use the default good morning string argument for that parameter. Okay. So that's why it works still, which is very cool. So hopefully you find that pretty interesting. One thing to note though is that whenever you're specifying default parameters for a function definition, you have to make sure that it's at the end of the function definition for the parameters list. So for example, as you can see here that this message here has a default value specified, but if we had, for example, for some reason we just had message before name, that would actually not work. Just by the way that Python and other languages work, you have to make sure that your default arguments or parameters that have default arguments are at the end, okay? So just make sure that you have that at the end, pretty simple. And then if you want to make sure that name has a default argument as well, you can actually still do that. That's perfectly fine for all of them to have default arguments. So we can say name is Joe, for Joe Mama, of course. So then we could do just greet by itself now, and that works perfectly fine because you no longer have to provide both a name and a message. It'll use the default values if those are not provided. So if we rerun this, we get hello Joe, good morning. Pretty cool, right? So let me just give you one more example of something that you cannot do. So if we define a function called sum of 3, and we have 3 different parameters, so num1, num2, and num3. Let's say that the goal of this function here is just to add all 3 numbers and spit it back out. So we're going to do return num1 plus num2 plus num3. Pretty basic function, right? And then we can call that by doing sum of 3, or we can say result is equal to sum of 3, and we can say 1, 5, and 2. So that should just give us 8, right? So print result, and that should just give us 8 into the console, and it does, right? Pretty simple, just adding 3 different numbers, 1, 5, and 2. But for some reason, let's say that we want to give this a default value of, like 69. This means that if you don't provide the third argument or the third parameter, it's going to have num3 is going to have a value of 69. So if we get rid of this, it'll be 69 plus 5 plus 1. So that should be 75, I believe. Yeah, there you go, 75. And let's say that we make a further modification. We take this away and then put it for here. This is invalid. That's why I put illegal here. This is now illegal because, again, the parameters that have default values or the default arguments have to be at the end of the function, okay? So just make sure you have it like that, and it's pretty easy to remember that. So, just make sure you know that, okay? And as you can see, it works with any data type for any type of variable that you want to provide as a argument to this function potentially, okay? So not just strings, of course. Anyway, so let's move on to the next thing now, which is keyword arguments. So keyword arguments. So this is actually something that's pretty unique to Python. It's not present in Java or C++, for example, which are two very popular programming languages today. Keyword arguments are a way to provide your arguments in a different order. So at the moment, let's just say that we have this function here. So simple greet. Again, you're going to pass in a name and a greeting. So to say hey, name, and then the greeting. So very similar to the function that we created previously. And let's say that we want to call it, right? So we can do simple greets, and then we can pass in Joe, and then the greeting is you smell. So now let's say Joe, hey Joe, you smell. Perfect, there we go. And now let's say that for some weird reason, we want to provide the arguments in a different order. So to do that, well, we can just take it, cut it, paste it right there, and let's see what happens when we do that. Now, obviously, that won't really work. It'll say, hey, you smell Joe, which doesn't make any sense. And that's pretty obvious because the way that parameters work, you may have figured out so far, is the order in which you provide the arguments corresponds in the order of which the arguments are assigned to the parameters in the function. So this means that the first argument corresponds to the first parameter. That's what the value will be of that first parameter. And then the second argument corresponds to the value of the second parameter. So that's pretty obvious, and hopefully you figured that out by now. And that's called positional arguments within Python. So now if you want to provide it in a different order, you're going to use keyword arguments. There's a different name for that. It's not just called keyword arguments. There's a different name for it, but keyword arguments is the name that I'm familiar with. So to use keyword arguments, you can just specifically tell it which parameter you're targeting and what the value of that parameter will be. So you can do name is equal to Joe, and then comma, greeting is equal to you are awesome. So now it'll do the exact same thing. Hey Joe, you are awesome. And that's because we have told it what parameter we're assigning the value to. And yeah, so that's pretty easy, right? But now if you want to change this, cut it again, and then paste it in front, change the order. Now this is perfectly valid because we're telling it exactly what parameter we're targeting. Therefore, there's no confusion on the position of the arguments and what it's assigned to, and it'll still work the exact same way. We get the same exact output. There we go. Hey Joe, you are awesome. So as another example, if we do simple greeting and then do what's up and then Bruce, this will not look correct when we run it because then it says, hey, what's up, and then comma Bruce. That's just because, of course, we're not using the keyword arguments. So if we go ahead and specify the parameters that we're targeting, then it'll work perfectly. So we can do greeting is equal to what's up, and then name is equal to Bruce. So if we rerun this, we get, hey Bruce, what's up? Awesome. Okie dokie, so I want to give you guys one more final example of a combination of keyword arguments and also default arguments. So here we have a pretty complex looking function. It's not really too complex, but it's probably the most complex thing that we've seen in this tutorial so far, just because we've done really basic stuff so far. So here we have a function, define function, calculate BMI, so calculate your body mass index. So you have 4 different parameters that's asking for: the weight, the height, the unit, and the round to number. And so the weight and the height are obvious. The unit is just like kilograms, pounds, etc. The round to is how many digits you want to round it to. So it's going to say if the unit is kilograms, then you're going to calculate it a certain way. If the unit is pounds, it's going to calculate it a different way. And then after it's done, it's going to round it to a specific number based upon what you tell it to round it to. So here we go. This is where we're actually calling it. So we can do calculate BMI. The first one, we're passing just 2 arguments. And this is because when we define the function, the last 2 parameters actually have default values. So we only need to provide the first 2 if we need to call this function. So we're just specifying the weight and the height because those do not have default values. And so for the second one, we're providing a weight, a height, a unit, and a round to. And if you look closely, you can see that we're using the keyword arguments here because we're telling it exactly what parameter we're assigning it to. And over here at the end, you can see that we're overriding the default values specified when defining the function, okay? So the third one's probably the most unique one. First of all, we're providing a weight and a height, which is pretty simple. And then as you can see on the last one, and the last argument that we're providing, we're actually doing it using keyword arguments. So we're specifying what parameter is targeting and then giving it a value. And the reason that we're doing that is because, as you can see, the default unit is kilograms. So if we don't really want to change that, but we still want to provide the last argument, then the only way to skip that really is to tell it which parameter you're targeting and then using the keyword arguments, okay? So in other words, if you don't want to have to provide kilograms because it's already the default value anyway, then you can just go ahead and tell it round 2 is equal to 3. So that makes sense, hopefully. And so for the last one, this is pretty basic. You're providing the weight, the height, and then you're overriding the unit, which is kilograms, to set it to pounds, okay? And for the last one, you don't need it because it has a default value. So hopefully that makes sense. That's just a more detailed, more complicated example of how you can use default values and keyword arguments within Python, okay? So hopefully this video was very helpful. If you have any confusion with this, then let me know in the comment section below, but hopefully you learned a lot. In the next episode, we're going to learn more complex stuff, which is how to use lists as arguments and also how to do variable arguments within Python functions. So stay tuned for that. Alright, so that's it for this video. Thanks for watching. In the description below, I'll leave a link to the code for this episode so you can check it out. You can bookmark it, come back to it later. If you forget any concepts or you just want to review the concepts I taught in this video, I'll mark everything up with comments so you can come back and read the code without having to rewatch the video, although your reviews are greatly appreciated. So yeah, I'll leave a link for that in the description below, so make sure to check it out. And another thing is I'll leave a link to our Discord server. It's a big community for programmers. You can ask for help on your programming projects if you're stuck on something, or maybe you can get some new friends. If you don't have any friends, there's lots of people here. It's growing really fast. You can find lots of people who are passionate about the same things as you. For example, if you like Minecraft Spigot development, you can find lots of people who like that. If you like C++, if you like Java, if you like web development, it's a really, really big programming community. So feel free to join. There's a link for that in the description below. And the last thing I want to tell you is that if you want to support this channel, you can click the join button below this video, and you can join this channel as a member for as low as 99 cents a month, and you can cancel at any time. You get some cool perks like early access to all of my new videos, a cool rank on my Discord server like you see right here on the side, YouTube members, and also you get to see yourself on the screen like you see right now. So if that sounds cool to you, feel free to join. If you don't want to, that's fine. If you can't, that's okay too. I really just appreciate you watching the video anyway. And thank you. Thanks a lot. And that's it. So if you like this video, leave a like. If you want to see more, subscribe. And peace.